orchestrator, right? And then on what areas the orchestrator can be installed and what are the difference between those, and the types of robots that we generally use in orchestrator. Excuse me, if anyone is not talking, please go on mute. Thank you so much. And the next one is we are going to talk about machine template versus the standard machine. So this is one of the before we actually do a orchestrated walkthrough, right? So machine template versus the standard machine. And followed by live demo on few of the concepts, and finally question and answer. Very nice. Now let's quickly go through a next slide. So first of all, let's start with the Uipath components. So what are the components present in a Uipath? So before we actually jump on to the next slides or the next concepts. So the first one is Studio. So where actually we built our workflows or we design our automations, right? So once you are done with the development, so what you do, you deploy onto the orchestrator. So where actually you can manage the robots, you can manage your business processes, you can create a folders, you can assign the permissions to the users and a lot of things that you can do at orchestrator. So once you do such configurations, now it's time to run your workflow. So how do you run your workflow? Using a robot, right? So what actually this does? So it will going to execute the set of instructions or the set of code that you build at your studio level. And most of the people were thinking that this robots comes along with the orchestrator. So that is completely incorrect, right? So we have to buy the robot licenses and those must be configured in orchestrator. So that is how the linking between the orchestrator and the robot will actually happen. So these are the important components of Uipath. Now let's quickly move on to the next slide. So orchestrator introduction. So it is a centralized server that enables you to manage robots in executing the business processes, right? So here a couple of key features of orchestrator. The first one is provisioning. So let us assume I have everything ready. I have a studio and I have a community edition of orchestrator, or I would say the Uipath cloud. And now it's time to connect from my studio to orchestrator. How would I do that, guys? So I will go to Uipath assistant, right? So I just do a sign in, so which is interactive sign in login. And the moment I do that, so the robot will be allocating, the license will be allocating to my account. So that is actually the provisioning. So this again happening through a orchestrator. The provisioning is happening through a orchestrator. And the next one is deployment. So once we are done with the code in our studio, so we are actually deploying that to orchestrator, right? So now again, we have to do some configurations in orchestrator to run our processes or to run our code. Again, how the second feature is happening? Through orchestrator. And the next one is configuration. So if you want to perform any action, so we have to do some configurations. So again, how that is happening? Through orchestrator. And the next one is queues, right? So in order to run your business process effectively, so we are using queues currently in our business processes. So it actually tells you what is the successful data, what is the failure data, and what is the average time per transaction, all these details, Again, how we can use queues? By accessing the orchestrator. And the next one is monitoring. So it is very important. So it is not enough if you run your process. It is always important to monitor your bot status. Again, how this is happening? Through orchestrator. And the next one is logging mechanism, which is the important one to track of your bot status. So we are maintaining some log messages, and also the orchestrator can be integrated to Kibana dashboard and Elasticsearch dashboard, so which actually gives a graphical representation, so which is most useful to the business users. Again, how this is happening? Through orchestrator. So everything, not only this. So starting from creating the folders and ended with the assigning roles and users to those folders. So everything can be done through orchestrator. So that is why I have used a word called centralized server. So it is a centralized server. So from where actually you can maintain a different actions related to the studio or something called different other products available in Uipath Automation Cloud. Very nice. Now you are at a good spot, like what is orchestrator and how it is helpful in our daily automations. So let's quickly go to the next slide. Now, on what platforms the orchestrator can be installed? So the first one is on-prem. So on-prem in the sense, so you are going to, or you can install Orchestrator in your local service within your organization. So if you go to a IT department, so there are a lot of servers present there, right? So on those servers, you can install Orchestrator, right? That is, we call it as the on-prem. And when coming to a cloud, so what is this cloud? So cloud is nothing but the orchestrator is hosted on a cloud. So behind the scenes, some of the cloud service providers like AWS and Azure, so those will be taken care of it. So that we call it as the cloud. You get it right. So on what is on-prem and what is cloud. And the second difference is when coming to a on-prem, so it is completely your responsibility. Of course, the Uipath team will taken care of, they will be assisting you in couple of configurations, but still there is a lot of manual effort needed to install Orchestrator on the on-prem because you are going to install on your local servers. So you have to check the enough space in servers. If they are not available, you have to buy some. And also during the installation, you have to do a lot of configurations. If when coming to a cloud, so everything instant, so they will be, UiPath team will be providing you the some, orchestrator, I would say access to orchestrator. So you have to change some URLs according to your organization. And then the next thing would be, something like, of course, you have to do a minor configurations. So to get access to orchestrator, but that doesn't, it doesn't really as effort as we keep it at on-prem side, right? So that means we need a lot of manual effort when you are installing the orchestrator at on-prem. But when coming to a cloud, so it is very simple to access orchestrator or to do some configurations to access your orchestrator. So that is a second difference. And when coming to a third one, the products. So if you look at the products, so we have access to almost all the products when we are using a cloud orchestrator. But when coming to on-prem, so the UiPath is not providing access to few of the products like, task mining or UiPath apps or data service or integration service and other few products, right? So this is the next important difference. And the last difference would be, you know what? So whenever an update comes, so let's say there is some update comes to one of the product, assume there is some update comes with the Studio Web. And if you are using the on-prem, so you must install manually by yourself, right? So that means you have to be so alert with the updates and the releases, what's going on with the, UiPath latest releases or regarding the products. But when coming to a cloud, so everything happens instantly because it is already hosted on a cloud, right? So you need not to install anything additionally. So once an update comes, once a release comes, it will going to impact your existing products in your orchestrator. So that is the fourth important difference between the on-prem and the cloud. So eventually, if you are looking for a right platform for your organization, so whether is the on-prem better or is the cloud better, I think this slide would help you, right? So this slide, I would say that makes you to think of the right answer. So these are the pretty much important differences between the on-prem versus cloud. And if you ask me what would be the better, I will go with cloud because I have access to almost all the products and there is a less manual effort. And I would say, I can plug and play with other products instead of, irrespective of what I'm currently working on. So, but again, it depends upon your organization. But these were a pretty much important differences between these two platforms. Let's quickly jump on to our next slide. So type of robots. So there were two types of robots generally we use in Orchestrator. The first one is attended robot, so which is suitable for small tasks, and next one is unattended robot, so which is suitable for a complex, right? And the automations that run with attended robot, so generally involves a human involvement. But the automations that runs with unattended robot, so does not need any human involvement. So this attended robot mostly we use in our, something like development process, right? And also the Studio X users, they also use this attended robot because they always have to trigger the automations. So based upon, or I would say, which includes the human involvement.
Usha,
And when come,
yeah, sorry for interrupting you. Yeah, some of the guys are saying that your voice is little bit
low.
Not low. Some background noise is coming. You can,
How about now?
yeah, now it's good. You can go
Fine.
slowly. Okay. Yeah, proceed. Proceed,
Got
proceed.
it. Yep. Thank you so much. Nice. So let me know, guys. So if you face any difficulties in listening my voice, or just raise your hand and stop at that moment, so that you will not going to miss any points. Okay. And yeah, so let's continue where we left off. So when coming to an unattended robot, so what is the first difference I have said? So attended robot, will be mostly using by the I would say that we generally use for this attended robot uh, for the automations that specifically needs a human involvement. And this attended robot mostly use it during our development processes, right? And the Studio X users who wants to run their automations with the human involvement. So generally they always trigger automations by clicking on run button every time, right? So they generally go for a attended robot. And when coming to a unattended robot, so what happens is, so this is mostly used by the technical people, and also who wants to run their automation so without any human intervention. So I would say finally, so this is mostly used by the technical people, and also this unattended robot will be using for long running workflows. Have you heard about Action Center? Right. So what we do? So we generally send the any invoices to a human validation, right? So in that case, it is feasible to run the process using the unattended robots, and because unattended robots have a such type of capabilities to handle the long running workflows or the automations that includes the Action Center capabilities, right? So these are the two general robots that we use in Orchestrator. So I hope this slide makes you clear. So if not, just let me know. We can repeat it later. Very nice. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now we will, understand what is the difference between machine template and the standard machine. Correct? So before we do a orchestrated walkthrough, so let's understand this terminology, guys. So machine template, what is machine template? So let me tell you an example in a simple words. Okay. So I have server 1, server 2, and the server 3. And I'm not sure from which server I'm going to connect to Orchestrator every day. So from day 1, I'm going to connect from server 1. And day 3, I'm going to connect from server 3. Right. And day 2, I'm going to connect from different servers. So this is something like random. So I'm not pretty sure. In that case, you can go for a machine template. Getting it? So if I'm not sure from which server I'm going to connect to Orchestrator every time, so I can go with a machine template concept. And when coming to a standard machine, so this is pretty straightforward. So if you know, or if you're trying to connect to Orchestrator with the same machine every time, so then you go for a standard machine. So that is the only difference. So I'm repeating one more time. The machine template says, if you are not aware or if you're not sure of from which machine you are going to connect to Orchestrator every time. So the example is I have server 1, server 2, and the server 3. So day 1, I will be connecting from server 1. Day 2, I will be connecting from a different server. And day 3, I will be connecting from a different server, right? So every day I'm not connecting from the same server. Then you can go for a machine template concept. So how we configure machine template, I'm going to say, don't worry. Okay. But understand the theoretical part of machine template. And when coming to a standard machine, so if you are aware or if you're connecting to Orchestrator with the same machine every time, then go with a standard machine. That is the only difference. Perfect, guys. Now it's right time to, orchestrated walkthrough. So what I do is I will log into my Uipath Automation Cloud. Very nice. So this is my Uipath Automation Cloud. So the moment I access the Uipath Automation Cloud, I see a first word called tenant. Right. So what is actually the tenant? So tenant is a service, so which allows you to manage a group of services, or I would say tenant is a container, so which allows you to manage a group of services for a group of users, right? So you can manage, okay, so for user 1, I want to give this service. For user 2, I want to provide this service. For user 3, I want to provide this service. So those managing can be done using a tenant. Now let's see if I want to know how many tenants were present in my orchestrator. So, right, so in that case, click on this button and then go to admin. So it will take you to a different page. Fine. So I have only one tenant for now. But can you create multiple tenants? Yes, for sure, you can create a multiple tenants. And that capability comes if you're using an enterprise version or enterprise trail, but with community edition, you may not have this option to create a multi-tenancy capability, right? And now you can create a multiple tenants. So for what reason I have to create a multiple tenants, guys? So let us assume I have a different teams in my organization, okay? Invoicing team and then accounting team and some other team. Now, can I create a different tenant for invoicing team? Yes, you can. And can I create a different tenant for accounting team? Definitely you can, right? So you can create each tenant for each department present within your organization. And the next thing is, you can create a different tenants for your development, for your testing, for your UAT, for your production, and as many as you need. But that capability comes only with the enterprise trail or enterprise version. But with community edition, you may not see this option. Okay. Now, the moment I click on this tenant, so there were few other tabs present here. So the most common issue that most of the users facing is, hey Usha, so when I try to connect to UiPath Assistant, so it says connected and unlicensed. That I don't know why. So that is because of you don't have enough licenses, guys. So how do we check it? So the moment you click on the tenant, so there is something called licenses. Just click on it here. So you can see what are the licenses that you have allocated with, right? And if you want to add any additional licenses, just edit allocation and then, you can assign license to yourself. So currently, if you see, there is something called unattended license, there is testing license, and there is something called I have 300 robot units where I can use for my AI center and all. Okay, so if you don't see that any of the license present like unattended or attended license, so you cannot connect to Orchestrator. So if you are facing the same issue where the Uipath assistant says connected and the licensed, unlicensed, so make sure you go to the tenant and then click on the licenses and make sure you have enough licenses. So this way it could resolve your issue. Fine. Now, the next common issue that we see for most of the users is, I can't see the automation hub in my UiPath automation cloud. I can't see action center. I can't see A center. Why? Right? So that is because of you might not have enabled the services. So for that, just click on the service again, go to your tenant. Okay. Click on the services. So here you can see the list of services that it has enabled for your account. And if you want any additional services or the products, so just click here and you can see that, right? So just check check the box so that this specific service will get enabled. So this option again could resolve your issue. So these are the most common errors that we see. Hope this helps you. And let's go back to our orchestrator. So I will go to orchestrator. And here I want to mention one important thing is, so most of the people think that, so this whole thing is orchestrator. No, guys, this is not completely an orchestrator. So this we call it as the UiPath Automation Cloud. Okay, so within the UiPath Automation Cloud, so we see different products available, like Orchestrator is also part of it. And besides this, we have Studio Web, UiPath Apps, Integration Service, right? Action Center, Document Understanding, and many of those. But remember, so when you're talking with your colleagues or when you're talking with your team, so don't call this entire thing as Orchestrator. This is a UiPath Automation Cloud, so which has different products, including Orchestrator. Getting it? Now I go to a tenant. Now, first of all, let's understand the introduction of each tab, right? So now we will be deeply looking to the other configurations like processes and queues and all. So first of all, the robots tab. So here it says, so what is the robot type that the user is using? So if we take this user, so this is the username and this is the robot type unattended. So this user is using a unattended robot type. So these details can be seen in the robots tab. Perfect. Now let's go to our folders. This is the most important thing, guys. Okay. So see, I have a lot of teams. I have a invoicing team, I have a accounting team, and I have a different teams. So do you think that can I can I provide access to the users or to this just only to this folder? Or do you think it is more effective when I create a different folders for each team? So definitely it is, if we create a different folder for each team, so it looks like interesting and also in an organizational way, it is so better, right? So in organizing. So let's do that, guys. So let's create a folder. So what I do is I will be creating a folder here. So I will name it as invoicing. Okay. And then click on create. So the folder is created. So what is the next step? I can assign the users related to invoicing department to the specific folder. So let's wait a couple of seconds. So the folder is still creating. Right? Think of it. So, instead of assigning all the users to us only one folder, it sounds like a mess, right? So instead of that, we can create a different folder for each department, and then we can assign users to that respective folder. So that is what I'm currently doing. So I have created a folder called invoicing. Very nice. Now, if we look at the right side, there is something called assign account or group. Now it's time to assign the users to this respective folder. So I will go here and then I will search for the user, Usha, right? And then click on it. So now you got the user. Now, what is the next thing? You have to assign the permissions. That is very important, right? So if I click on here, so I can see the different permissions like robot, administrator, folder administrator, and all. So you can actually select the respective role and then assign. That's it. That's it. So that is the way of assigning the users to a folders, right? So what do you mean by assigning the users to a folders, guys? That means these users can only access the service present in this folder. They can't access the service present in the rest of the folders. So that is what I mean. That is the term called assigning the users to this folder. Perfect. Now machines. So we will look at this in this tab. So both were same. So let's talk about machines in this tab. Okay. So now perfect. Now I have created a folder. Now the next thing is I want to create another folder called accounting. Okay. So this is another department. Now just click on create. Now what I do, I want to assign the users, which users, accounting department users to this respective folder. Right, so this it sounds pretty interesting, right? So creating a folders, and it is such a organizational manner, so where we can create a different folders and then assigning the users to that respective folders. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. Nice. So the folder has been created. What is the next step? I have to assign the users to the specific folders. Again, what is the step? Go here and then search for the user, Isha, right? And then select the user. Now it's time to assign the roles. So click on edit, and if we click here, there are different roles coming up. So select the respective role and then click on assign. That's it. So this is the process of creating a folder and then assigning the roles. Pretty interesting, right? And now let's move to the next one, personal workspace. What does this mean? The name itself says personal workspace means it is entirely your space. You can actually publish your workflows to this personal workspace. You can actually create run the automations. You can actually create a queues. You can actually create the assets and then storage buckets and all. You can do what you want. Nobody can view your work. So this is your personal workspace. So where actually you can test everything before you go further, right? So now within the personal workspace, there is something called manage mission. So I will tell you at this tab, right, how to create a missions and all. So for now, let's move to the next tab, which is called monitoring. So here it gives the list of actions that we provide at the orchestrator level, like how many were successful jobs and how many were faulted and how many were running, right? And also it gives a graphical representation of the data that we process through a queues. So this is mostly useful for the business users to see what's going on. And the next one is machines. So here it says what are the machines that was connected to orchestrator and how many were unlicensed, how many were available. So that all we can see in the second table. And processes, here it says, how many number of processes we have created and how many were executed successfully and what is the time frame, what is the total time span it has taken to run each process, and all those details we can see here. And next one is queues. So here it says what are the queues that we have created, right? And what are the transaction items present in each queue. So currently there is no data in the queue, so hence it is showing blank. And otherwise it shows like how many number of queues were created, how many number of transactions were failed, and how many were successful. All these details that we can see. And what is SLA? SLA is something called service level agreement. So what is meant by service level agreement? As am I doing any agreement with the UFS or what? No way. So this is something called, so think of it. So for every product, so there is some threshold value, right? Similar to that, when you are using a lot of, when you are creating a lot of queues, when you are trying to upload a lot of transactions onto a queue. So what happened? That means you are using the product beyond the threshold. So in that case, this service level agreement will give you a predicted risks. Okay. Hey user, you are doing this, which is not at all good. Here is the resolution. Just do it immediately. So those type of actions that we can see it in the second tab, right? So when you are using the product beyond the threshold value, so then it will going to tell you what are the predicted risks and what is the resolution or what is the solution for that, how do you handle it. So all those things that we can see in this specific file. You see here, the data which is highlighted with orange is the predicted risk, and the data which is highlighted with red is the predicted breach. So currently there are no risks, but if you are going beyond the threshold, so then it will going to tell you all these things. License. So it will tell you, what is the license that you are currently using and on what day you have used what license, right? So it will going to tell you all those details in the license tab. And next one is unintended sessions, so which is the most important thing for a developer, right? So earlier, so let us assume there is something happened in the production machine. So one of your automation got failed. So what is the first step you do, guys? So you will check the log messages. That doesn't help you. Assume that doesn't help you. Okay. And then exception screenshots. That doesn't help you. Now, what is the thing? What is the other solution that we use to find? So we log into a production server and then run our code, run our automation in a attended mode. So this is the actual process that we used to follow earlier. Now, can I do that? You can't do that directly. Remember this point. Because, so recently the Uipath has released something called configure troubleshoot session. So this is for unattended sessions or unattended robots. Getting it? So production machines, we always run our automations in the production machines. So we have got a question like from where we will get the orchestrator logs. So that we will talk about later. So in the Q&A session or at the end of the session. So we will talk about those things in detail. And yeah, let's continue where we left off. Now this is a, something called configure troubleshoot session needed if you log into your orchestrator and then run your code in attended mode. Okay, so earlier we just simply log in and then run. Now we have to configure or we have to enable the troubleshoot session, guys. So for that, you have to come to this unattended session, okay? And then click on the three dots and then say configure troubleshooting session, enable, and then give the timeout. So this is simply says what time you are going to spend in the production machine. And this time will be in the form of seconds, right? It will be converted to minutes. So this is one of the important things. So going forward, so if you want to log into a production machine and then run your code, so make sure. So another question, are you providing the entire session recording? Yes, we do that. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. So sorry for the interruption. So let's quickly get in, continue the session. So now what I'm saying is, so if you want to log into a production machine and then run your attended code, right, attended mode, so then make sure you configure the troubleshooting session first. Okay, so going forward, if you want to do the same, so ask your admin, hey, can you enable the troubleshoot session? Then they will going to enable. Now you go and log in and then open your code and then run your workflow. So what happens if I don't do this? You can't run the code. That's very simple answer, You can't run the code, that's it. Right? So the studio will open, but you cannot run your code. Okay, so this is only for unattended sessions. Remember this point, developers, remember. And then next one is user sessions. So this will tell you, what is the license that is currently using by this user and when they have last login. So is the license is currently active or no? So they are using the license, currently or no? So when they have lastly login or lastly used the license, so all those details can be seen in the user sessions tab. Very nice. Now let's quickly go to a manage access. So what we do here, so we actually assign the roles to a user. So that we did in the folder level, right? So we created a folder and then we have created a user and then assigned the roles. So that we are doing same in the manage access step. And along with that, so we are also going to edit the permissions or the roles of the users that were already created. So that action also we can perform in the manage access tab. Very nice. Now the next one is machines, so which is the important thing. So irrespective of you are a developer or a admin, so it is it is important to understand the machine template and the standard machine. Okay. So now I will tell you how to create a machine template. Again, before that, so here we have understood, right? So what is machine template again? So I was already telling you, if you're not sure about from which machine you are going to connect to Orchestrator, go with the machine template. And if you're connecting from the same machine every day, go with a standard machine. Now we will see it. Okay. Click on this and then click on the machine template and then give the template name call test. I will just tell you what are the steps that you have to do. Okay. And process type. So do you want to use this template for only to run a foreground process? So what is meant by foreground process, guys? That means the automation which does not have a UI interaction. Sorry, which have a UI interaction. And what is meant by background process? The automations which does not have a UI interaction. Okay. So foreground means the automations which have a UI interaction. Background means the automations which does not have a UI interaction. So do you want to use this template for what? So that you have to select. And again, it is mandatory, not mandatory, optional. And when coming to a process compatibility, so do you want to use this template for only Windows automations? Cross-platform automations. You can actually select it. If not, you can leave it as empty. So because these fields are optional. And when coming to a tags and all, I'm going to tell you, okay, I'm going to tell you once we publish the code to orchestrate. And what is this? So here, the number defines the license, the run license that is using by the or going to use by the machine. Okay, so if you look at here, so what the Uipath folks were saying, the number of licenses specified below will be consumed by each machine connected to this template. So this number defines the license that is going to consume by the machine. Which machine that is connected, which is connected to this template. So I'm going to tell you that. Okay. So for now, let's understand what is this number mean. This number means it defines the license that is going to consume by the machine. So just only remember that single point. Okay, don't worry about the remaining things. So I'm going to give a 1. So you may ask a question, Usha, can I give as 2? You can give as 2, but still it will going to give error, right? Because at a time the machine can't consume 2 licenses, right, guys? It can consume only 1 license. So that is why we have to give only 1. So once it is done, you can actually provision. Very nice. And once you click on provision, you see there is something called client ID mission key and then client secret. It is providing these details. Remember this, okay? Remember this point. Now close it. I'm going to close it. Very nice. Now, okay, so fine. So we have created a template that is fine. But how would the orchestrator know it, guys? How would the orchestrator know, if I'm connecting from the machine 1 or the server 1, how it will going to connect to our orchestrator? So that I'm going to tell you. So once you create a machine template, there is something called copy client ID or mission key, right? So copy this. Now log into your non-production machine, right? So non-production machine, and then go to Uipath Assistant and then click on the preferences, go to orchestrator settings. So I'm just signing out here to show you, where to copy this machine key. And from the drop down, select the machine key, provide the orchestrator URL and paste the machine key over here. That's it. So this is how actually you have to work with a machine template. Getting it? So let me go back to our orchestrator. So what you have to do first, you have to create a machine template and then copy this. So why I'm telling the unattended? Because if you see here, this supports only the unattended runtime license, guys. So if you go with the attended, so it will not going to work. So this is purely unattended runtime licenses. So that is why I'm saying once you create a machine template, it will going to generate the machine key. Now log into your server, which uses the unattended runtime license, and then go to a Uipath Assistant. So let me open my Uipath assistant. Okay, and then go to assistant, choose the mission key, and then copy that mission key and then connect it. Okay, now the moment I connect it to where it is connecting, is it connecting to orchestrator or the template? It is connecting to this template. Okay, now what happens, guys? So now, this template will be understanding. Okay, so this guy, has configured this. So whenever the user logins from server 1, or server 2, or server 3, so which has the unattended runtime licenses, so I should make sure that the user is connected to orchestrator. So this is simply like acting as a barrier between your orchestrator and your assistant. Getting it? So the moment I give a details, so your machine will be connecting to this machine template, right? So now the moment I log in to a server 1 or server 2 or server 3, irrespective of the machine, now it will going to allocate the license for you. So once it disconnects, again the license will roll back. Again the license will get released. And the next day, if you connect from server 3, again it will be giving the license to you. And once you disconnect, again the license will be released. And the next day, if you're connecting from server 2, again the license will be allocating. Once you disconnect or once you log out, the license will be released. So that means a single license, but it is shifting between the different servers and it is effectively allocating. So that is the importance of mission template. So let me first of all connect my assistant to orchestrate first. Very nice. Now it is connecting. Let me close the unnecessary tabs. Perfect. Okay. So this is how actually the mission template would work. Getting it? So again, I'm repeating the steps. Create a mission template, and then once it creates, copy the mission key, go to your unattended or log into server which has the unattended runtime license, and then copy that in the Uipath assistant. So if you have 3 servers that using unattended runtime license, log into all the 3 servers and then copy the mission key. Now the template, this template will be understanding, okay, so these many number of mission key from whatever server the user has connected, I should be able to allocate the license. That is taken care by this template. Very nice. Now we have understood the template. The next one is something called a standard mission. So I was already telling you the standard mission is something. So, something if you're connecting from the same mission every time, you can go with a standard mission. So here you can give the standard mission name and the runtime licenses, and then just click on provision. That's it. Okay, so this is the difference between mission template and the standard mission. And we are already aware of what is standard mission and how does this work. But the understanding of the mission template functionality is very, very important. Now let's move to the next one. So I'm going to remove this since we are already done with this. Very nice. And since we don't have the enough, licenses, so we can't show that each and every concept. But if you understand it, so you can do it practical way. And let's go to unattended setup. So this is the recently released capability. Okay, so the Uipath is saying that, so with this setup or with these configurations, so the unattended automations will be much faster than the existing setup. So let's see. So here, this is not completely released yet, and they were saying choices will be made available soon. Maybe once it is completely released, then it would be helpful to us to understand more better. And let's go to a packages guys. Now, what is this? The moment I publish the package or the process to orchestrator, so it will be converting to a Nugget package and then it sits under the packages tab. Getting it? So now there is a other way. So you can also click on the upload button. And if you have the Nugget package ready, you can browse for it and you can upload directly instead of publishing from the studio. Very nice. And the next one is app versions. So this tab defines, the Uipath apps that we have deployed. Okay, so it will tell you what are the versions of Uipath apps that we have deployed. So let me show you the sample one. So if I click on this package, you can see the different versions here, right? You can see the different versions. So similar to that, so if we deploy the Uipath apps, so those versions also we can view in this specific tab. Perfect. Now let's go to audit. So it will tell you the actions performed by the user in orchestrator. So if you see this user has deleted mission, this user has created something, this user has created a queue demo, right? So what is this for? So the admin can track of the actions by the performing by the user, and if there is something wrong happening, so they can roll back access, right? So they can actually remove the access to the user. So that way they can do that. So this is specifically for the admin. And the next one is credentials. So every time we don't need to create an asset, right? So because of the security challenges and all those, so few of the clients, they were maintaining those credentials in Azure, AWS, and some online applications. So if that is the case, so you can get the credentials from those specific applications like, AWS, Azure, CyberArk, database, and all. This is one of the important or the security way where we can store our credentials. So if you're going with the orchestrator, so that is fine. If not, if you store your credentials at somewhere, you can actually use a add credential store. Perfect. And the next one is webhooks. So this actually notifies you, right? So this actually notifies you. So when something happens in the orchestrator, so what happens? Something happens. So what is that something? I will tell you. Okay. So if you look at this, there are a lot of actions like job completed, job halted, and job stopped, right? And then task created, and there were other details as well. So if you want to get notified, right? So if you want to get notified when any of these actions happen, then what? You can go with the webhooks, right? Okay, so this is not a direct one. So we have to work with some APIs. But if you want to get notified, you can actually go for a webhooks, and it also be sending notifications to your teams as well. So that is actually happens through a API configuration. And the next one is license. So it will tell you the overview of your licenses. And the next one is alerts. So it will actually show the alerts that the users are performing their actions at a folder level or at a queue level or at something, something called at a process level. So those actions that we can see here, again, this is for the admin operations. And the next one is setting. So this is for tenant time zone, right? So tenant time zone. So currently we are at, so IST. So, but the tenant time zone is set to, UTC. So if you want to change the tenant time zone, so you can directly change it here. So this would be helpful when you're actually creating the triggers in Orchestrator. And next one is deployment. So this tab is specifically for, like we can do some configurations whenever we are publishing the libraries to Orchestrator. Do you want to publish to only host feed? Host feed is nothing but you can access the library across the tenants. Okay. And is it only for tenant feed? If you select this option, you can access the library in only that specific tenant. And both host and tenant feeds, if you select this option, you can actually perform the operations related to the first two. Okay. You can also access the library across the tenants and also individual to the tenants. You can perform both the operations. And the next one is packages. So if you publish the package to an orchestrator, so if it is internal, that is fine. But if you want to publish it to somewhere else, then you have to provide the deployment URL to where you want to publish. Okay. So that option has to provide it here. And next one is mail. So we are receiving daily mail alerts, right? So hey, so your robot has been disconnected, your robot has been connected. So all those details we are getting, right? So how we are getting? Because of this mail setup. So this will actually send notifications to your mail based upon your login to your orchestrator, correct? And if you want to use some other mail IDs, you can go for a use custom settings and then provide the related details. Getting it? Next one is robot security. This, the Uipath was saying, so what is the robot authentication? So if you were using an unattended robot, so as like I mentioned you earlier, so the mission template would be the recommended one. So that is what they are saying here. And if you're using a attended robot, so the interactive sign-in, what is actually interactive sign-in? So if we go to a Uipath assistant, right? So the moment I sign out and then sign in, so what happens earlier? So I was able to connect to Orchestrator. So that we call it as the interactive sign-in. Getting it? So that we call it as the interactive sign-in. So I'm not doing any other configurations. I'm not giving machine name. I'm not giving client ID. I'm not giving any client secret. So automatic provision is happening. So that we call it as the interactive sign-in. So that is what these Uipath folks were saying. So it is really needed interactive sign-in as the user authentication when you are using a attended robot to run your automations. Nice. Now let's go to a scalability. So this is completely, what we call defines the transfer of protocol. So we don't need any additional configurations in it. And the non-working days. So here, let me delete this one. So this actually helps us to running the automations or avoid to run the automations in a specific days, right? So let's create a calendar guys. So let me give the name as test. Okay. So now I want to run the automations on the September 9th and the September 10th. Okay. Now I can choose the respective days here and then click on save. Now what I can do with this calendar, I can call when I'm creating a triggers. So let me go to automation. So let me go to what triggers, right? So click on add a new trigger. Now what I do is there is something called non-working days restrictions. Now I can select from the drop down. You see the calendar is appearing. So what happens now? So now, my automation will not going to run on the days that I have already selected at a calendar level. So that is the functionality of the calendar. Let me go back to our settings, non-working days. Fine. Okay. And next is cloud connections. So a few of the clients, they actually host their virtual machines in AWS or Azure or it's somewhere. Correct. So now if you want to provision those machines, you can actually select, Azure or AWS, the respective one, and then you have to provide the uh, configurations. Correct. And then you can actually provision that machine. So this is specifically for the persons who are actually creating a virtual machines in AWS and Azure. So this is pretty much about all the tabs under tenant. Now let's quickly move on to a shared folder. Okay. Now we will understand the respective tabs so that you will going to understand the tabs in other folders as well. Then we will see some practical live demos. Okay. And the moment I click on the home tab, you can see the statistics like processes and how many assets and how many jobs were successful, how many were faulted, and the graphical representation of the data, all those things that we see at the home tab. And when coming to automations, right? So there is something called processes, and this tab is more important for the developers, right? So there is something called process. So why should I create a process, guys? Why should I create a process? Once I deploy the code, why should I create a process? So can't I say to the robot, hey, go and execute the process? Currently, we don't have that option, but in future, we can expect such type of commands, okay? And now we have to create a process so that I can actually assign that process to a robot for the execution. Getting it? So that is the importance of process. We can understand in detail in further slides. Okay. And now job. So we can actually trigger the jobs and then monitor the jobs from this tab. And next one is apps. So this is specifically made for the Uipath apps. And if you deploy any app, so that app can exist here. And next one is triggers. You can actually run your automations based on some reschedule time, or there is something called queue trigger. So you can run your automations whenever a new item added to a queue. And there is something called event trigger. So this is purely related to a studio web. So I will explain you in a couple of minutes. Okay. And next one is logs. So it gives all the logs that you run through Studio or through Orchestrator. Okay. And if you're a person who is looking to monitor the jobs, right? So it is always recommended to monitor through a jobs tab because it is difficult for you guys to filter the data and identify so which log is related to the current automation. So this is not recommended one. And let's go to a monitoring tab. Just a minute. Usha, so there is a monitoring tab at the tenant level as well. There is a monitoring tab at the folder level. So what is the difference between these two? So this is actually, you can, you can know what's happening entirely at the tenant level. Okay. So this monitoring tab in the shared folder, so this only tells you the details related to only this folder. Getting it, guys? So that is the difference between the monitoring tab at the tenant level at the folder level. So again, it has pretty much of, how many were successful and how many were faulted. And it has the description of machines, processes, queues, and SLA. So as like I mentioned, SLA is a service level agreement. So when you are using the product beyond the threshold, so it will actually tell you the predicted risks and also how to avoid that. Okay, so that we can see it in the SLA tab. And queues. So what are queues? So queues are a containers. So where you can, or where the queues can handle unlimited number of transactions. In detail how to create a queue and other configurations as well. And also besides this, there is something called review request. So I will show you how to assign queue item to a reviewer. And assets, so here these are used to, something called store the values. So there were different types of asset values, something like integer, boolean, text, and credential. So let me remove the existing one. Perfect. And next one is storage buckets. So these are something called, the storage solutions that helps us to manage across different automations, right? So let me take a simple scenario. You can place a config file in your storage bucket, guys. You can place a output files in your storage bucket, right? So if there were multiple templates, so I want to send it to a different users. Now, instead of placing the multiple templates in your folder, you can place it in the storage bucket so that whenever if there is a change in the subject or a body, you can simply log into Orchestrator and make the changes simple. And if you are using a AI center, if you are using a AI center, and to train the data set, to train the PDFs, to train the invoices, to train the documents, you can call the data from a storage bucket. You can upload all your input data into a storage bucket, and those can be called at a AI center level. So there are different ways of using the storage bucket. So we will see one of the scenario during our practical demo. Okay. And this is purely made for the testers. So they can create a test cases. They can, schedule their test cases, and they can create some dummy queues to test their executions and all. And next one is settings. So here, we can actually create a machine so that we already seen at the, tenant level, right? So whatever the operations that we are performing, so we can actually do it here as well. So, something called go to machines, and here if I click on it, you can create a machine template or the standard machine. Now, question comes again, what is the difference between these two? We perform the same things at the tenant level, again at the folder level. So what is the difference between these two, Usha? Right? So the difference is the actions that you are performing here is at the tenant level. So that means that can be accessible across the tenant. But if you are performing this operations at a folder level, so that is related only to this folder. So that is actually the difference. And you can also assign the roles, guys. So you can click on this button and you can assign the user and also can assign the roles. Again, what is the difference between we have already done at the tenant level? So as like I mentioned, so this is at a tenant level, this is at a folder level. So whatever the users that you have assigned here, so let's say Usha, and then this specific user can only access the services present in this folder. So that is the difference. Getting it? Very nice. Now let's quickly move on to a studio. Okay. So first of all, before we move on to a studio, I would like to implement a simple use case. Okay. So I log into something called XYZ Bank. What is this called? XYZ Bank? Is it sounds funny? So this is some sample application. Okay. So this is a XYZ Bank. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to click on the customer login, and I want to select the user from the log drop down, and then click on login, right? And then we can extract the account details. We can actually extract the account details. So this is the use case that I want to perform. Okay, so let me go back to my notes, guys. So this use case I want to split into as a dispatcher and the performer. So why I'm doing it? Because I want to publish it to Orchestrator and then do some actions. So what the dispatcher does, read input Excel. So I have the input Excel already available here. Okay, so the bot has to read the input Excel first. It has sheet 1 and the sheet 2 data. Okay, and then filter uncommon rows. Okay, so there are some pretty rows here. There were 4 rows in the sheet 1, there were 4 rows in the sheet 2, and I want to filter the uncommon rows and get the uncommon rows only from the sheet 1. Understand my requirement. Okay, so there is a Harry Potter, Nick, Acharya, and the John. So in the sheet 2, there is Shiva, Nick, Acharya, and the John. Now what is the uncommon row? So the second row, here the Shiva and here the Harry Potter. Now I want to get only this value. I want to get only this value. So that is what I'm saying. So I want to compare the rows and I want to retrieve the uncommon rows only from the sheet 1. So that is my requirement. Okay. And then finally load data to a queue. So this is my requirement. So I have already built a code because we are not focusing on, building a code in Studio. So it actually saves our time and then we can focus on the remaining things. So I have taken an Excel application scope here and I'm reading the sheet 1 and the sheet 2 data. And I have taken a assign activity here. So this expression actually, you know what? So it get the uncommon rows only from the sheet 1. So this is as enumerable method. I hope you already had a data table session, right? So you must be knowing about this. So let me give a glimpse on this expression. So this sheet 1 data is a variable that has the sheet 1 data dot as enumerable method dot where function, and x represents the parameter. X represents the parameter. Okay. So this parameter is related to sheet 1 data. Remember. And now, okay, so now I have taken a variable called sheet 2 data. So which has the sheet 2 data dot as enumerable method again dot where of function of y. So this y parameter represents the sheet 2 data. Okay. And now what I want to do, I want to compare. So that is why x of 0. So this 0 represents a column index dot toString dot equals to y of 0, right? And then, this x parameter represents a something called sheet 1 data. This y parameter represents a sheet 2 data. And finally, what I want to get, I want to get a uncommon rows, right, guys? So if I go with this expression, so definitely it will going to give a something called the rows that are equal, but I want to get uncommon rows. So that is why I have used something called not before the expression of sheet 2. Getting it? So in childhood days, we have seen if it is true, negotiation, if you keep not before, it becomes false. If it is false, negotiation, if you keep not before, it becomes true. So that the same thing applies here as well, because there is no such thing like is not equals to option. So that is why we are using a not keyword before, the expression. Perfect. So now it actually gives the uncommon rows from the sheet 1, and then I'm printing the values, and finally I'm uploading the data to a queue using bulk add queue items activity. Very nice. So this is perfectly nice. Now what I want to do is let me go back here. Okay. So let me go back to a slide called this one. So now we will see publishing the studio workflow. Okay, so we will see it. We will see it once we complete the development. And triggering the orchestrator job, right? So triggering the orchestrator job, we will see once we publish our code to orchestrator, and monitoring the orchestrator job. So for monitoring the orchestrator job, right? So there were different ways, guys. The first one is log messages and video recording, and the next one is a live streaming. Getting it? So now, can we implement this in our studio? So these two are the options that actually we can perform within the orchestrator. So never mind. So now, can we implement this in our studio? Yes, we can do that. Now let's do that. Okay. So let me go here. And then what I want to do is I will simply keep I don't actually spend a long time here. So I will just take a log message. Okay. And then I will say something called log level as info. And then I just say hope or read input X. Read input X. That means nice. Now where is the next log message I want to update is, I just want to keep it here somewhere. Okay. So just again, I will say it as info. And then this time I would say that filtered TERD rows, filtered rows. Okay. And next I will take another log message. So this time I'm going to say as uploaded. Let me enclose within a double quotes, uploaded data to queue. Perfect. So this is one thing that we can implement in our studio, so that I have already implemented. So you may ask, so Usha, why you are doing all this? Because if I, if I let you know that which activity or what is the correct area or platform that we can use these activities, you can actually implement in your automations as well, right? So instead of doing instead of explaining everything separately, so if I combine all those, you would be able to understand better. So that is why I'm just also implementing the log messages. So the functionality of this we will see once we publish it to our orchestrator. Very nice. Now, what is the next thing? So let me go to this slide. So the next thing is assets, right? So I was already telling you that, these assets will be used to store the values in orchestrator. So now where can I use assets actually? You might be already knowing this, but please listen, patience, so that, few of the members also going to learn about this. So if I go back to my code, let me search for a something called asset. Okay, so if I look at the activities, there were different activities comes. Now let me create a sequence because I would like to explain something. Okay, so I will go to create a different sequence. Now what I want to do is I want to use a set asset activity. I want to see how this actually works, right? So let's go with the set asset activity. Okay, and then there is no asset in orchestrator right now. So let me create a new asset. So I would say something called input file path. Okay, and then what I do is I will just give my input file path here, copy as path, and then I will go here and then remove the double quotes and then create. So I have created an asset. Very nice. Now what I want to do is I want to replace the value. I want to replace the existing value. Okay, so let me go back to my studio workflow and then let me select the asset value from the drop down, right? So what is the value that I want to replace? I will give it in a double quote. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now what happens, guys? So this value will be replacing the existing value. Okay. Now you may ask a question, okay, Usha, that is fine, but how would I know? How would I know that the value has been replaced? I will tell you. Okay. So let's take a get asset activity now. Okay. And then choose the asset name here, input file path, right? And now I will assign a variable. So do you think it is really needed to assign a variable here? Think of it, guys. So this is the latest capability that the Uipath has released, which actually avoids creating a variable. If you look at here, there is some variable assigned, partially assigned to this activity. So this color is in gray color, right? So that means this variable has been partially assigned to this activity. Getting it? So this variable has been partially assigned. Now, can I reuse this variable? So definitely I can reuse it. So how would I reuse it? So let me take an activity. Let me take an activity called message box. So let me print that variable. So before that, for your information, so we haven't created this variable in the variables panel. Nothing we had done. So we are just going to reuse the variable. How would I do that? So click on this plus button, use variable, and then select the value under get asset. That's it. So if you see this, so now this color has been turned to black. So that means this is completely assigned to this activity. And if I look at the variables panel, you see that the variable has also assigned. I mean, the variable has also created. Earlier, we have not created, right? So this is how actually it works. So this is the recent capable of, I would say, recent release of UiPath, right? So once you give confirmation to the studio that you are reusing the variable, so then only it will going to create that, or it will going to completely assign that variable to the activity. Now let me run this, let me quickly run this workflow. And let's see what is the output that we will get. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if I go back to my orchestrator, if I refresh the page, you can see that the value has been replaced. So this is how actually you can use a set assert value. Very nice, guys. Now we are at a good spot. Now let's go back to our dispatcher. Now here I have given something called a static path, right? So now what I want to do is I actually want to get this value from the, something called the orchestrator, right? From the assets. So for that, I'm going here and then I
Hello,
will
Usha.
check the,
I have a doubt actually.
yes, please go ahead.
Actually, while bot is running, can we able to change the asset value in the asset?
You want to change the asset value in orchestrator?
While the bot, yeah, correct. When the bot is running, right? Imagine bot is
Mm-hmm.
running at the time, can we able to change it?
Yeah, so we can change it. So that way we can actually debug the code, right? And there is something called, something called immediate panel, where we can actually change the values of the variable we have. So that is also capability while we are running our code in debug.
The orchestrator also can we able to change at the time?
Orchestrator, yes, you can change it, but it's sometimes, it gives some unexpected output, because when the bot started running, and if you're trying to change at that moment, so the bot might able to capture it or might not able to capture it. Anything might happen, right? So it is always best practice to keep the value ready before you start the automation. So then actually it do the right execution or the right process of steps that you're expecting.
Okay, thank you.
Getting it? Thank you so much. That's it, guys, right? So you can change the value, but make sure it is always best practice, right? So before we run the automation, so we have the value ready. Because once the automation starts, then if you start changing the value, so, in the middle of the execution, bot might read the value or might not read the value. So that is up to the bot execution. Very nice. Now let's go back to my dispatcher process. So here I have given the asset name, and right. So here there is a value. Again, what is this? This variable has been partially assigned to this activity. Getting it, guys? So now I don't want to create a variable. I want to reuse the same variable. And if you see, there is no variable present in my variables panel as well. So now I want to reuse this variable. How would I do that? So go to Excel application scope, right? So this is the output value that I have to send as input to the Excel scope. So I will be going here and then use variable, and then again select the value and then get asset. That's it. Very nice. So this is how actually you can reuse a variable. You also, guys, start reusing the variables. Okay. So this is pretty interesting concept. So once you give confirmation to the studio that you are reusing the variable, then only it will going to create that variable in the variables panel. Okay. So but unnecessarily recreating the variables doesn't make any sense, right? So that is why, if the studio gets confirmation that, okay, so this user is trying to reusing that variable, so let's create that variable. So then only it will go into create it. Very nice, guys. Now we have implemented log messages, and this is something called the way of implementing the assets as well. Very nice. Now let's execute this. Okay, let's execute this process. And then, for that, let me also create a queue. And before that, so let me go to asset and then change the value here. I would like to give my input file path, copy as path, and then provide that here and remove the double quotes. Very nice. Now here, what I want to do is, there is some configuration called add robot asset value. So if you want to access this value by only a specific robot, so there is something called bot 1, bot 2, and the bot 3. And if you want to access this value by only a specific bot, so then you can go for a add robot asset value. So now you can check, change or configure the user, machine, and then text, right? And then text, and then click on it. That's it. So this is the way of assigning this value to a specific robot. Getting it? So currently we don't need this, but in your real-time implementations, you can also implement this actual concept. So I'm removing it and then click on update. Very nice. Now the next thing is, there are other folders, right, guys? Now the automation in the other folders also targeting the same asset. That means they want to reuse the same asset. Now, how would I do it? So do I need to create manually every time by going to each and every folder? So is there any other way? So let's see. There is a way. If I click on the three dots and then click on the manage links, right? So I can select the folders to which I want to copy this asset to, and then click on update and then click on continue. So now you can actually see, if you go to a invoicing folder, you can see that asset file copied. If I go to the accounting, so the asset value copied. Pretty interesting, right? So this is how actually you can reuse the assets instead of creating everything manually. Very nice. Now let's go to a dispatcher process. Okay, so I'm just running the process. You might be already aware of this process, but again, for testing purpose, I'm just running.
Can we reuse the assets in the different tenants?
No, that's not possible.
Okay.
That's actually a good question. Yeah, so this is only applicable to, something called the folders within the same tenant. But if you want to shift the values between different tenants, we don't have that capability, right?
Okay, thank you.
Will there be any situation while it will fail to fetch the credential in first attempt?
Yes, there are a lot of situations, where if you're using a community edition, there might be some connection lost, or the other reason could be, if you want to, if you have created asset in different folder, but you have connected to a different folder through a studio, right? So let us assume you have created asset in invoicing folder, but your studio has been connected to a shared folder. Then actually you are trying to retrieve the asset from the invoicing, I mean, from the shared folder, but it actually exists in the invoice. So it is something like, it looks like you have created a different folder and you're trying to access from a different folder. In such type of situations also, you might not able to get the asset.
And how to handle, like, let's say that the happy scenario is there, that folder and selected section in studio is also same, but still it is not fetched. So, uh, any alert mechanism or like any other way to handle it? Or...
So the one way of handle the such type of exceptions is, something like we cannot actually create an asset through automation. So anyway, the asset has to exist. So one good practice could be, if you're not able to access the asset, so just send an email to your team. So that way, actually, they will be handling it manually. But besides this, there is no way of that we can handle that scenario through automation. So whatever the actions we perform, so for that, definitely the asset has to exist in the orchestrator. So then only we can set value, or we can get value, or we can perform any other actions. But if the studio itself is not able to retrieve, that means there should be some permissions issue, or there should be some connections issue, or there should be some any other issue. So that only can tackle when we actually look into it manually. So in that case, you can send an email to your team, so notifying the same.
Okay.
Perfect, guys. So here I forgot to create a queue. So let me create a queue and then quickly add it. Now let's start with the dispatcher process. Perfect, very nice. So it is such a, interesting in the collaborative session. I really appreciate you guys asking the questions and all.
Hello, Usha, one more question. What is the difference between bulk queue and add queue item? When we need to use that activity?
So bulk queue item is something like, if you have the data is in a data table. So let's say I have 1,000 of rows, right? So now in that case, you can actually bulk add queue item. So whatever the data in the data table, it simply reads and then it pushes all the data at once. But if you're using a separate activity where add queue item, so you can actually, loop through each item and then something like you have to load that into a queue. So this is specifically recommended just when you have a less volume of data to load data to a queue. But when you have a thousands of data and it is already existing in a data table, so it is recommended to go with the bulk add queue item activity. Hope this helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Perfect, guys. Now I have I have got a message box like Harry Potter. So this is what I want, right? So I want to get the uncommon rows only from the sheet one. Very nice, guys. So we are done with our dispatcher process. So we are at a good spot. Very nice. Now let's look at the performer. So what is the performer that we want to do? So we want to get data from the queue. Okay, log into bank application. So I want to log into a bank application. So let me go to my XYZ bank. So log out, and then the bot has to click on customer login, and it has select the user and then click on login and then extract these details. Now here again, what I want to do is, if I go back to my slide, so the first two things we can only do once we publish the code to orchestrator. So now, how to monitor the orchestrator job? I was already telling you there is something called log messages. Now let's implement the log messages here itself. Okay, we will understand the functionality once we publish this code to orchestrator. Or I will keep a less number of log messages here. So I don't want to waste your time. So let me say as opened. Our friends, our few of the friends might also learn, right? So let me keep some log messages. So once after extraction, and extracted account details, right? So account details, and here I want to provide the variable. I will explain the code, don't worry. So here I'm using a extracted data variable. So I'm going to give that variable here. So let me click here and then I would say that extracted data. Very nice. And finally, so let me take another message box and I would say that successfully or added data to data table. Very nice. You can use as many as log messages you want, but still, it is very important to use a limited number of log messages, guys, because if you're using log message after each and every activity, sometimes what happens is the orchestrator data will be full. Okay, so in that case, it will run into issues. And the next thing is, it will not going to show you the log messages from the next run or from the next step. So it is recommended to use the limited number of log messages and make sure you give a meaningful sentence. Okay. And now, this is one we have actually implemented. And now let's walk through the code. So I have taken a data table. So this is just to store the account details. So these details, right? And then the next thing is I'm opening a browser and then I'm getting the data from the queue and clicking on customer login button. And this is, I'm waiting for this element. So it is always recommended to use an element exist activity and wait for the page to completely load before you go to a next action. And here I'm selecting the user from the drop down. Let me go back to a home, and here I'm selecting the user from the drop down. And finally, I'm click on login button. And here I'm extracting the details, and here I'm closing the browser. Here I'm setting the transaction status to successful, and I'm adding the details to data table, and finally writing to Excel file. Very nice. So this is what all I'm doing. I'm not deep diving into each and every activity because our focus is on orchestrator. Very nice. So now we have implemented like one of the concept related to monitoring the orchestrated job and assets we have implemented in the dispatcher. Now it is time for the storage buckets. So now let's go back to our storage buckets, guys. So I was telling you already. So these storage buckets helps us to manage your storage solutions across your automations. So you can place your input config file, you can place your output files, whatever it is. So let's take a scenario. Okay. So my bot has failed to send an email. Right? So now it has failed to send an email to the client. Now what happens? So within a couple of hours, we will be receiving an email from the client saying, hey, so where is my notification? So where is my log? Right? So you are on leave on that day. So what you do? Instead of your team members referring the multiple documentations related to that process, they can simply go to a storage buckets and then download the log file and then send it to a business, right? So this is one of the scenario. And the next scenario would be, as like I mentioned earlier, you can use storage buckets for your AI-centered training data set. And now let's implement the previous one, okay? So here, I'm writing the file to a Excel file. Sorry, I'm writing the data to a Excel file, right? So now I want to upload this file to a storage bucket. Okay, so let's do that. So I will take here, I will say as something called storage. So if I look at the activities, there are different activities coming up, guys. So the first one is delete storage file. So if you want to delete the file, and don't assume this is the file. So this is just a storage bucket. So within this, there is a file exist. Okay. So if you want to delete that file, you can go with a delete storage file. If you want to download storage file to your local, you can go with this activity. If you want to get the list of storage files, you can go with this activity. If you want to read storage text, not file. Okay, so without downloading, if you want to read the storage text, then you can go with this activity. Upload storage file. So if you want to upload some file to the storage bucket, then you can go with that activity. Okay, so what are the different files that you can upload? You can upload anything. It could be X6, it could be text, it could be JSON, other files. That's up to you. Okay, and the next one is something called, if you want to write storage text, okay, to the existing file, then you can go with this activity. So for now, what I'm going to do is I will use this activity, which is called upload storage file. So I want to upload this Excel file to a storage bucket. Getting it. Now here, what I do is I will I will provide the storage bucket name, so which is called output. So this is my storage bucket name, which is called output. Okay. And now the next thing is here path. So what path? My Excel file path, the output file path. So again, my output file path is here. So within the project folder, I have a output folder. And here I'm going to store my output file path. So I'm going to give that here file path. So let me open in advanced editor. Environment.current directory. Okay. And then double quotes. So within the output folder, and within that I'm going to store some output.excel6. Very nice. So this is the path. Okay. And then destination. So what is this destination mean? So once you upload the file to a storage bucket, so what is the naming convention that you want to give? So here you can provide that. So I will go with the same name. So I will say as output.xlsx. That's it. So this is the data I want to give. Okay. So very nice, guys. Now let's execute this process. And we have already the data in our queue, right? Let me go back to my queue. So here this is the queue, and if I go to a view transactions, so there is a new item, and here it has the customer name Harry Potter. So now I'm going to run the performer process. So before that, what I do is let me close this tab. So I will go here and then I will run the process. Now it will going to open the browser and then get the data from queue, and it will going to click on the customer login, extracts the data, and then places it in an output Excel, and that will be loading to a storage bucket. Now let me go back to output folder, guys. So can I see that? Yes, I can see it. So it has a output Excel and it has the account details. Very nice. Now let's validate in the storage bucket as well. So I'm going to storage bucket. So if you see this is set to successful. So I'm going to storage bucket. So click on this folder. So there is something called output.xlsx, and you can actually download it. And then let me look into that folder. So let me go back to the downloads folder. And then this is the one. So it has the same data, right? So this is how actually you can work with the storage buckets. Very nice, guys. Now it's time to publish our workflow. Okay, so it's time to publish our workflow. So before that, there is one more point I want to add. I have also enclosed all these activities in a try-catch block. Okay, and then I have used a set transaction status, so which is going to set the queue item status to failed. And let me also keep another log message here. So this is important. Wherever you get an exception, don't forget to keep the log messages. So that is important. So I will say as something called exception message. For successful scenario, if you don't keep a log message, that is fine. But for failure scenario, you must keep a log message. So exception dot message. Very nice. Save. Perfect. Now my workflow is ready to publish to Orchestrator. Now what I do is I will just go to the dispatcher first. Okay. And then now I will click on the publish. Very nice. And then now I'll click on the next. And here there is something called remove unused dependencies, guys. So during our development process, so we might install a lot of packages, a lot of dependencies, right? So now most of the times we might forget to remove those dependencies. So what happens if I don't remove it actually, so it will lead to some unexpected issues, we don't get sometimes the expected output. So it is always best practice to remove the dependencies while you are publishing your code to Orchestrator. And this option actually helps us to do that automatically. So just check this option before you publish it to Orchestrator. And next, click on next and then click on publish. Very nice. It has been published to Orchestrator successfully. Good. Now let's move on to a performer. So let's do the same thing here. So I will click on the publish. Okay. And then I will click on next. And make sure you check remove unused dependencies and next and click on publish. So this is the way of publishing the process or your code to Orchestrator. So some of our friends might be, learning, they might be a beginners. So hopefully you understand how to publish the code to Orchestrator. Very nice. So we have completed the first point successfully. Now let's go to Orchestrator, guys. Let me go to a shared folder, and before that, let me go to Pennant, go to packages. You see here, process has been published, right? So if I want to download this process, how would I do that? So just click on the three dots, click on view versions, and then download package. So it will be downloading in the form of a Nugget package. Now go to your download folders. Okay, so this is my download folder, and what you do is convert it to zip file. Yes, and then extract all, right click, extract all. Now you can see all your code in the folder. So if I go to a content, double click on the content, you can see all your code. So this is how actually you can download the Nugget package and convert into a normal code. So let me remove it. And also I will remove this. Very nice. Okay. And the next thing is you can also upload the package directly from this folder. Okay. So let me also show you this. So let me download the package one more time. Okay. Close and click on upload and then browse and then go to a downloads folder. So you can actually upload the Nugget package this way. Okay, instead of publishing from the studio, you can also do this. Very nice, guys. So my package has been uploaded. Now let's go back to a shared folder and go to automation. The first step you have to do once you publish your package is to add a process. Again, why should I create a process? Can't I say to the robot, hey, go and do this? No, it's not possible, right? So you have to create a process. You have to assign that to a robot for further execution. So that is why we are creating the process. Okay. Now let's click on add process. Okay. Now here we are going to learn a lot of other configurations. The recent releases of Uipath we are going to learn here. And then click on next. So here the display name, you can give whatever the display name you want. Otherwise, the process name will be taken as the display name. Very nice. And when coming to a labels, to understand the labels and the key value pairs here, so let us assume a case, guys. Okay. So now there were list of processes, there were a lot of processes, and I want to run a specific process. Now, how should I search for that process? I don't know the process name. I forgot the process name. How should I search for that process? So these labels and the key value pairs will help us to do that. So let me say you can give whatever you want. So I'm giving XYZ. So this is my application name that I have used in my current process, right? So I have used XYZ, and also there is some Excel process that I have used. So I'm going to give the Excel as well. Let me again type X, Y, Z. Okay. So, and the next one is perfect. So I have given these two as a labels. You can give whatever you want. So if you are using Workday, so you can give it as Workday. If you're using ServiceNow, if you can give it as ServiceNow. Whatever you want, you can give it. Okay. So there is no like limitation. Okay. You have to only select from this specific default list or something. You can give whatever you want. And now let's click on the key value pair. So here you can again you can give any key value pair. So I'm selecting from my end as the department, since I'm related to development department. So I'm selecting the department as a development. Okay. So you may ask a question, Usha. So when you are clicking here, so we see a lot of default list coming. So were you created already, or is the orchestrator providing those? Orchestrator is not providing those. I have already used these in my workflows or in my process. So that is why this list is coming. Okay. So I will go select a department. And the next one is, you know what? Let me search here, and it is giving us development. Very nice. Let me create it. So now I will show you, okay, so how to search a processes based upon this label. So before that, let me also create another process performer. Otherwise, performer will going to cry, okay. So here we can give a display name, okay, and then tags, labels, I will go with again XYZ. So since I'm using this application, and the next one is Excel. So since I'm using Excel application in my process, and now I'm going to give the same thing here. So department, and I would say the department as a development, and then click on create. Very nice. Now I have created a processes, right? Now I will show you how to search the processes based upon the labels and the properties. So now if I go with a filter, click on filter, and then go to labels, Now, when I click on the labels, you see that there are different labels coming up that I have assigned to my processes. Now, select XYZ bank. The moment I select the XYZ bank, you'll see the dispatcher and the performer is coming up. Oh my God, it's actually, making my work less, right? So instead of searching the process name, if we can search based upon the labels, it's actually making my work better, making my work easy instead of remembering the process name, what I have done. So if you know only the application that you have used in that specific process, just search based upon the application name. That's it. And now let's see how we can search the process based upon the properties. Okay. And now I will go here. I will select the department, not accounting. So I will go with the department. Okay. And then I will go with the develop. You see here the two processes again coming. So this is how actually, the labels and the properties would work. Getting it. So now I would like to also tell you another option. So if you learn the latest capabilities in Orchestrator, so from Monday onwards, you can actually implement it in your real-time, automations. So there is something called retention policy, right? So here, so after these many number of days, the jobs related to this process were going to delete from the orchestrator. Again, why is this happening? Because to free up your orchestrator database. So if we keep on creating the processes, queues, log messages, and everything, the orchestrator database will be full and it will going to create some issues, right? So to avoid those, the Uipath comes with an option called retention policy. So after these many number of days, the data will going to delete from the orchestrator database. If you don't want to delete, you can actually select archive and the data can be stored it in a storage bucket. We're already aware of storage bucket, so we should be good, right? So this is the the meaning of retention policy. Very nice. Now I will go back. Okay, and then we should be good. Now we are good. We have created a processes. Now it's time to trigger the job. So how do we actually trigger the job? We will see. The first part is we can actually start from the processing tab, right? So I will go here and then I will start a job. Here, if you want to run the process based upon the account machine mapping, so I want only my bot one account to run. I want to run this process only on the server one. So if that is the case, you can go with these options. Okay. So let me show you. So I can select the account, machine, and then start. That's it. The process has been started. So few of our friends might not know how to start a job. So this is the one way of starting your job. Okay. Now the bot has already started running. Now it is reading the Excel file. It has given the message box. Very nice. Okay. Now we will see the other process. Okay. So let's run the performer. So I'm going to do the same. So again, if you want to run your process based on account machine mapping, so I want to run my bot only with the RPA bot one account. I want to run this process only on the server one. So if you have such type of requirements, go with the account machine. Otherwise, just hit start. So that what happens, guys, the orchestrator will going to allocate dynamically. So whatever the robot is free, whatever, the server is free, it will going to allocate those details to run your process. That's it. Now the execution is also done. And if you look at the storage bucket, so we have the output file. And within the output folder, also we have the output file. So let me show you that as well. So you will be more clear. So if I go to output file, so there is also output folder. There is also output file. Very nice. Now this is one way of triggering the job. Now we will see the other way of triggering the job. Okay. So let's go to a trigger. So here I'm going to click on add a trigger. And here, let me say as banking app. And then dispatcher, ECH here, and then process name, select the dispatcher and job priority. So I will tell you some interesting thing. So if you select the priority as highest, okay, and there is another job which has the priority as low or very low. Now, if the two jobs triggers at the same time, what happens, guys? So what happens? Do you think which job will going to trigger first? The job which has the priority of highest will going to run first, will going to initiate the execution first. So that is the power of job priority. Okay. So if you define the priority as highest, so it will going to run first. So the remaining jobs will be in the queue. It will be in the pending status. So that is actually the job priority functionality. And here again, if you want to run your process based upon the account and machine mapping. So you can go with the details. Otherwise, you leave as is. Okay. And here time zone. So currently we are in IST. So I will search for Chennai. So this is our IST time zone. So here you can actually there are different options to schedule your process. So I will go with daily. And daily at what time? So it is around 18, right? So I will go with 18:45. So it's a 24 hours time zone. Okay, it's a 24 hours time zone. And if you give us 5:45, so it will be considering at 5:45 a.m., not p.m. So it is a 24 hours time zone. Remember this. And if your requirement does not fall under any of these categories, then you can go for a Cron expression. There is a separate documentation available. The Uipath has released called Uipath Cron expression. So it has almost all the characters that you can use to build a Cron expression. So I'm going to share this document as well. Okay, so for now, let's go with the daily schedule. And then if you have a calendar, if you want to avoid your automation running on a specific days, you can go with the calendar, if not just late. And the next one is, there is a new option called set execution based trigger disabling. Okay, so sometimes the job might be faulted, right? So the job might be faulted continuously. Now, in that case, the disabling of trigger is very, very important unless we find the issue, right? Otherwise, it keep on sending the emails or something might happen. So to avoid such type of cases, so this is the option that the Uipath has recently released. So you can actually give the counter here. So if the if the execution or if the process has failed or exceeded this count, then actually it will automatically disable your trigger. Pretty interesting, right? So try it in your upcoming automations. And now what I do is I will just click on add. So in 59 seconds, so let me increase the timeout so that we can also create a trigger for performer. So I will say as something called 47, 1847 I want to run. Now let's quickly create a queue trigger for the performer as well. So here I am going to give a banking app performer. And then process name is banking process performer. Again, the job priority we have already discussed, right? And if you want to run the process on an account machine mapping, you can give those details, otherwise leave it empty. And here we have to provide the queue name. Okay, so we have to give the queue name, on which queue or in which queue, if the new item is added, we want to trigger the process. That queue has to be given here. And next one is, there is no need of adding a time zone. And then if you want to select the calendar, you can go with this. And as we have already discussed about this, so let me click on add. So the queue trigger has successfully created. So this is the best practice guys, okay? So most of the people, what they do is, they will schedule the dispatcher process and also they will schedule the performer. So why have schedule the performer process, right? So we have already the queue trigger. So whenever an item added to a queue, trigger the performer process, right? So why should we need to again schedule the performer? So let's do that. So if you're still scheduling, so try this way in your upcoming automations, okay? And there is 1 minute to trigger. And besides this, there is something called event trigger. So this is purely related to Studio Web. Okay, so this is purely related to Studio Web. In Studio Web, there is something called event-based automation, event-based trigger. So whenever any action happens, like whenever a new email arrives to Outlook, whenever a new folder created, whenever a new file updated in SharePoint, so whenever the action happens, automatically your workflow get triggers. Does it sounds pretty interesting, right, guys? So without doing any schedules and all, if the process is automatically triggering based on some action, so it is pretty interesting. So if we develop such workflows, such Studio Web workflows with the event-based triggers and publish it to Orchestrator, so those will be sitting under the event triggers. Okay, so let me know if you're interested in Studio Web, we can take another session. This is all about event triggers. So this is purely related to Studio Web. And now let me see. So there is 21 seconds to trigger the job. So let's wait for a couple of seconds, guys. So now we have seen, publishing the process to Orchestrator and how to, we are currently looking at, and how to trigger the job through a Orchestrator. right? So the different ways of triggering. So now the dispatcher has started, right? So it is running and it will going to give a message box, and now the performer will automatically trigger. So this is nothing but a time-based and the queue-based trigger, and it is selecting the data and then it uploads the file to a storage bucket. So these are the different ways of what? So these are the different ways of triggering the orchestrated jobs. Now let's see, the next concept is monitoring the orchestrated jobs, right? So we have already implemented something. What is that? Log messages, right? Now let's see it. So this is the dispatcher started. So if we click on the three dots and if I go to a view logs of this job, so we can see the logs. Read input Excel. Yes, that means the bot has successfully read input Excel. So that means filtered rows. Yes, the bot has successfully filtered rows. And loaded data to queue. Yes, the data has been loaded, right? So because of these log messages, we can track the bot status. And remember, whenever an exception comes, make sure you are maintaining a log message, guys. So with the successful scenario, it is okay if you don't maintain, but in the exception, you have to maintain, okay? And also don't keep unnecessary log messages. It actually consumes a lot of space in your database, okay? Orchestrated database. And when coming to a performer, same here as well. View logs of this job and you can see open browser, extracted account details and add data to a data table. So this is how actually you can monitor the bot status step by step. Now, what is the next step? So the next step is something called a video recording. Now let's look into it. So I will go to a process, okay? And then what I do is I will first go to a dispatcher process, click on edit, and then click on next, click on next, okay? And there is something called job recording here. And first of all, let's look at record all jobs, then we are going to understand this, okay? Record all the jobs. The name itself says record all the jobs irrespective of the job status. It could be successful, failed, resumed, stopped, or something called, faulted, whatever it is. So the name itself says it records all the jobs. Now click on update. Very nice. Now let's go back to our process and then go to a performer process here and then click on edit. Again, we go to next. We go to next, right? So here there is something called job recording and record all the jobs, enable that option and then click on update. Perfect, very nice. Now let's trigger the process, guys, okay? So this time I'm just manually triggering the dispatcher without any specific time. And here I'm not giving because I don't have any requirement that I have to run on specific account machine mapping. I just click on start. Perfect. So now the bot has started. So though I'm not giving a machine details, how we actually it is starting it. So it is called a dynamic allocation. Okay, so dynamic allocation. Now the performer will going to trigger since it is based on a queue-based trigger. So it clicks on the customer login and then it extracts the details and uploads file to a storage bucket. Very nice. It's done. Okay. Now let's look at the recording. So if I click on the three dots or if I click on this one, so there is something called recording. Okay, so just click on open recording. Then click on it. So it will actually capture your screen, what has happened within the server, right? So this way, this is one of the way to monitor your jobs. So this is the recently released capability. And now let's go for the performer process. And then I do the same thing. So I can actually click from here or from the previous one that I have already showed you. So this is how actually the recording works. Perfect. Very nice. So we have understood
But
the
how
recording, right?
many?
So how?
But how many minutes does it record the action?
So mostly it
Is
will.
there any time limit?
Yes. So it has time limit. It will going to record only for the 3 minutes. So more than that, we don't have. Currently that option don't have such capability to record more than 3 minutes. But in future, let us hope we can get at least we can get a option or capability where we can adjust the time spans. But for now, it is only for 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And now let's look at the next option. So we have understood how actually the recording would work, right? So now this time I'm going to dispatcher again. Okay, and then I'm going to click next. So here this time let's go with this option. Okay, this option. So and then click on update. And then click on update. Very nice. I'm not doing for the performer process because this is something that we can actually something called test the scenario using only dispatcher, because we haven't handled any exceptions in the dispatcher. So what is the relation between exceptions and the option that you have enabled? I will tell you, okay, don't worry. Now let's run the dispatcher first, okay? So this time, this is a successful scenario. Remember guys, so I'm going to trigger the process without any account machine mapping. So just hit start. So this is a successful scenario, okay? Let's see. And now the bot has started. It is reading the Excel file, and then, it gives the message. The performer has started. Now it is going to process it. It selects the data and then loads the data onto a storage bucket. Very nice, okay? Now the execution is done. Now this is the dispatcher process, right? So to which process we have enabled the, something called that option. So let's go back here, click on next. No, click on next. So here there is something called record and store failed jobs. So this option we have enabled for the dispatcher, right? So now let's go back to our jobs tab, and where is that job? So here it is. Now if I go here, why I don't see that option enabled? Let me refresh the page, okay? So let me refresh it, and again let me see. Nope, I don't see that option enabled. Why? Because that option is only applicable if your job status is faulted. There were different job status, right? So when I say faulted, don't assume that, okay, if something happens in my code and if I handle that code, okay, so will that going to record it? No, that's not going to impact. That is not applicable for this situation or for this step. So if I look at the job state, so there were different job states, right, guys? So if the job status is faulted, so then only the recording is available. So that the option that we have enabled is only applicable for that situation or for that area. Getting it? So this is a successful scenario. The bot has run successfully. So that is why we don't see that option. So that is why the bot hasn't recorded. Now let's see the failure scenario. Okay, so I'm going to process this. So for that, to replicate the failure scenario, so what I do is I will just cut this input file and then place it somewhere. Now my bot will going to read the sheet 1 and the sheet 2 data, and it will going to fail now. Okay. We haven't handled any exceptions in my code, right? So definitely the status will get faulted. The job status will be faulted. You see, the job status is faulted, right? Now let's see that option has been enabled or no. Let me refresh the page and then go here. Dispatcher process. So if you see here, the open recording option is enabled, right? So that means what, guys? So if we chose the option as record all the jobs, it will going to record all the jobs irrespective of the status. It could be successful, faulted, terminated, resumed, or whatever. But if we enable the option which is record and store the failed jobs, if the job status is faulted, then only the recording option will be available. So now you have understood, right? Very nice. Now let's go back to my folder and then place the input file in the same folder. So here it's supposed to be. Let me copy it. Very nice. We have understood the difference. Understanding the difference is very, very important, because once you were strong at the basic, you can actually play with it like anything. So if I go to a dispatcher, so now let's go on, click on edit, and now click on next. Click on next. It's still loading. Give a couple of seconds. Click on next and then click on next. Very nice. So now we have understood the difference between these two, right? So you can actually start implementing in your real-time scenarios as well. Now the next thing is screenshot. Okay, so this is pretty similar to the exception screenshots that we have in our code. You can provide the frequency, you can provide the duration. So for how long, for what amount of time you want to capture the next screenshot every time. So that configuration we can provide here. So it is pretty similar to the, the exception screenshot functionality. And now we have understand, the video recording option. And the next one is live streaming, so which is the advanced option to monitor the job. Okay, now there is no feasibility to actually show this option in my machine, because we are currently running the process in the same machine, and also we are trying to do some live streaming, so that actually wouldn't possible. So if you're running the automation in a different server, you can actually enable the live streaming and then see it from here, right? So the live execution of the bot can be watched in a different session. So how do we actually do it? So let me disable this job recording, since we are done with this concept, and enable the live streaming, and then click on enable. So is it okay? So if I enable, will it going to work? No, there is a additional thing that we have to add. What is that? So we have to install Tight VNC option. Okay, so I would say that live streaming Uipath. So there is a separate documentation available for this. So if I click on this, so if you see, Tight VNC application has to be installed in which server? In the server that you want to monitor. Okay, and then you have to follow the next set of steps. Then only it would work. Otherwise, it won't. So I can also share this, within the chat if anybody needed. Now let me quickly go back to our orchestrator, and also I can share this drawn expression. So if anybody needed, very nice. I'm also closing this. Perfect. Now let's go back to our orchestrator. Excuse me. Now this is how actually the live streaming would work. Okay, so it gives you a different session. It enables a different session, and where you can actually start looking into the bot process. Very nice, guys. So you can try that. So this is very pretty simple. And update. So we are done with the, like triggering the orchestrator job. So we have seen what are the different ways of triggering. We have seen what are the different ways of monitoring the orchestrator job as well, right? And including the recent capabilities. Now, the next thing is I will tell you how to actually assign a failed item to a reviewer. Okay, I will actually tell you how to assign a failed item to a reviewer. But that what I do is I will, run the dispatcher again. Okay. Click on this button and then start. Very nice. The bot has started, and it will going to read the data and give some message box. Perfect. And now the performer has started. So what I do is I just close the browser. To what? To replicate the failure scenario. So what happens is immediately, will it going to throw an exception? No, it will going to wait for a couple of minutes. This actually handles this concept actually handles the timeout property in the activity, right? So there is something called timeout. So it will wait for a specific time, then it will throw an exception, but we have already handled in our code, right? So we have already handling the exceptions in our code. So it will actually handle that exception and set the transaction status to a queue item status to failed. But still the status is successful. Why? Because we handled that exception. Okay. And now if I look at the logs, okay, now here it says, what is the message it gives here? So it says, could not find the UI element corresponding to the select, right? So now you can actually view the recording and then do all the things in order to trace out the issue. Now let me go to a queues and then click on the queue item. So which is view transactions. If you see, the status is set to fail. Now I want to assign this to a reviewer, right? So this is mostly used when you are doing some UAT or testing, right? So we might have to review with our team lead, or we might have to review with our admin. So we have to showcase, what are the transaction items failed and why those were failed and all those things. So once we get approval, then we can take further steps. So instead of sending the log and all those, you can actually assign the failed item to a reviewer. I will show you that. Okay. If I click on here, right? So there is something called, if I click on the failed queue item, so there is something called, assign reviewer. Okay. Again, this option will not available for again the successful items. This is only applicable for only the failed queue items. Assign reviewer. So you can see something called, you can actually assign it to the admin or the user, whoever you wants to, and then click on assign. So once it was assigned, that specific user can view that item in their review request tab. Okay. Now, if I go here, I can see that item. Now they can change the status. They can change it to in review, and also they can change it to something like mark as verified. So the status has been changed. So they can change it to mark as verified. And if they want to edit, they can edit the transaction item. If they want to something called clone. So what is meant by cloning? So again, the new item will be creating in a previous queue. And if they want to retry item, so definitely the moment they click on the retry item, so that item will be creating as a new item in the existing queue, right? So let me do that. So let me say as mark as verified. So I have checked everything. So everything looks good to me. And what I do is I will just clone it so that a new item got added. Now the performer will immediately going to trigger because this is a queue-based trigger. Because this automation is a queue-based trigger, right? So this is how actually the queues, we can actually assign the failed item to a queue. To a reviewer, not a queue. Very nice, guys. So this is, these are the different concepts that we can look into being a developer or being a admin. So it is important to know the functionality of each tab and, the what we call the different recent capabilities or the recent releases regarding Uipath. And we have discussed a lot. We have discussed recent releases that got into the orchestrator and all. And also we have seen the sample executions. Now let's quickly move to the next slide. So before I go to a next slide, so I would like to talk about something modern folder capabilities, right? So I quickly complete this within a minute. Okay. Automatic version of robots. So what does this mean? So if I go here and then click on sign out and then re-sign in, so what's happening is typically happening, right? So am I connecting? Am I giving some configuration? No. Am I giving some machine key? No. Am I giving some client ID? No, nothing I'm giving. So the moment I click on sign in based upon my user credentials, it is actually allocating the license, right? So that we call it as the, automatic version of robots. So everything is happening automatically. So that is automatic version of robots that comes with a modern folder capabilities. So whatever we see till now is a modern folder capabilities. So every person is talking modern folder, right? So let's talk about those for a minute and then we can wrap up the session. And the next thing is users assigned at the folder level. So we have already discussed, right, guys? So in tenant, once we create a folder, so what we are doing? So we are assigning the users by clicking on this button. So that is what they are saying. This is also a modern folder capability. Next one is automatic robot management. So we have already learned about machine template, right? So what's happening? So irrespective of the machine I'm connecting to, it could be server 1, it could be server 3, or it could be server 2. From any server I'm connecting, but still I'm able to allocate, I'm able to consume the license, I'm able to get the robot, I'm able to execute my workflows. So that is all happening because of what machine template, and that we call it as the automatic robot management. So this might be your interview question as well. So note it down. Okay. So this might be your interview question as well. So what are the capabilities of your modern folder? And next one is set roles per user per folder. So if you go here, if I go to a folder, okay. So now what I can do, guys, I can actually assign the user, and based, we can also set the roles, right? So we can search for that user and also we can set the role here itself. So that thing is called it as the set roles per user per folder, right? And next one is automatic license management. If I go back to Uipath Assistant again, what's happening? The moment I click on sign out and re-sign in, still I am able to access the orchestrator. So am I changing anything? Am I configuring anything? No, nothing I'm doing from my end. So all I'm doing is I'm just, the moment I log into orchestrator, it is allocating some robot and, that is actually consuming. It is allocating some license that is actually consuming. So that we call it as what? Automatic license management. And this is also called an interactive session. Remember this point. And again, this could be your next interview question. So what is interactive session? Okay. So the moment I click on sign in, so it logins to orchestrator. So based upon my credentials, it will going to allocate a license. So that is what I'm consuming here. So this we call it as the automatic license management as well. And the next one is active directory integration. So what does this mean? So think of this one, guys. So in orchestrator, instead of creating the every user manually, okay. So if there is some source and we can have the list of users there, And once we search in the orchestrator, should we able to get it? Yes, we can get it. So that source name is called as a Azure Active Directory integration, right? So we can have all the users in our Azure, okay? And then we can integrate with our orchestrator. And here, the moment I click on search, I can find the username. Simple. Simple. It's something like, we are storing all the user details somewhere and then we are using it later. So that we call it as the Azure Active Directory integration. So with this capability, so it completely avoids creating user manually in the orchestrator. So we have to create all the users in the Azure first, then integrate with orchestrator. So then we can easily find that orchestrator and then give that roles and everything, whatever needed. So that is up to you, right? So these are the pretty, the what we call advantages or the modern folder capabilities that we have currently in our orchestrator. And this also be your next interview question. Fine.